Well, everyone knows right now there are major efforts to target undecided voters. But what you may not know is about a very specific subset of the electorate that's currently being wooed for their votes. And that group is made up of environmentalists who did not vote in 2020 or any election since. The Environmental Voter Project estimates that more than 8 million climate advocates did not vote in the 2020 presidential election, and more than 13 million skipped the 2022 midterms. The nonprofit group says their goal is to identify these people who haven't voted recently and convert them into a powerful demographic at the ballot box. So we want to bring in now Nathaniel Stinnett. He is the founder and executive director of the Environmental Voter Project. It's good to have you with us. So 8 million climate activists that didn't vote. I was surprised by this number. Why do you think that is?
Well, it is surprising, and there are likely two things going on. First, people who care deeply about climate and the environment are disproportionately young and disproportionately people of color. And those are two groups that not only tend to vote less often across the board, but they're also the subject of voter suppression campaigns. And a lot of people don't think about that in the context of the environmental movement, but it's a real thing. And the second thing that's going on here, Lana, is when people think about taking action on climate change, the first few things that always come to mind have to do with their own personal behavior. They change what they eat or they change how they get to work, but they rarely think of politics in the way that, say, someone who cares about healthcare or someone who cares about reproductive rights does. And that's a lot of the reason why politics isn't sort of the go-to outlet for a lot of people in the climate movement, at least not yet.
All right. So how are you at the Environmental Voter Project trying to change that? How are you going about reaching these people?
Yeah, so we do it in an odd way. We start off by identifying millions of people who care deeply about climate already. So we're not in the mind-changing business. We're in the habit-changing business. So we find these people who already care deeply about climate, yet we can see from public voter files that they're not voting. And then we don't need to even talk to them about climate change, right? Because they already care about the issue. We just need to change their behavior. And to do that, we work with thousands of volunteers around the country. We're canvassing, so we're knocking on doors, we're making phone calls, we're sending postcards to them, and we as a staff are also doing digital ad campaigns and direct mail. And this fall, we're targeting 4.8 million of these potential first-time climate voters.
And you know, Nathaniel, as you're talking, we're looking right now at this graph about early voting. We know that there is already so many people who have cast their ballots. Have you seen progress in early voting at the polls?
Yeah, so far we really like what we're seeing in early voting. So as I mentioned, we're targeting 4.8 million potential first-time climate voters. And we can see in public voter files that over 78,000 of them have already voted. Now, to reiterate, Lana, these are all first-time voters who consider climate their top priority. And the numbers are particularly large in swing states like 5,400 new climate voters in Pennsylvania, 9,000 in North Carolina, 15,000 in Georgia, a state that was decided by less than 12,000 votes 4 years ago. So we really like what we're seeing.
Well, when I was looking at that chart with Georgia, actually first-time voters are turning out at greater rates overall than climate-specific voters, the group that you're targeting. So, Nathaniel, if you are actually able to, that was turnout among all registered voters versus climate voters. But if you're actually able to be successful in this, what impact do you think it could potentially have not only on this election, but in the policies that elected officials actually implement when it comes to climate change and the environment?
Yeah, well, you and your viewers don't need me to tell them that we live in a time of really, really close elections. So even though the climate voter voting bloc isn't the largest one out there, when you're dealing with 7 swing states, all of which are within the margin of error, well, little changes in who shows up to cast ballots can have an enormous difference. And as far as the long-term policymaking impact, I mean, the simple truth is, even in this hyper-partisan time that we live in, there is one thing that unites all Democrats and Republicans, and that is, boy, do they all like winning elections. I mean, nothing motivates a politician more than the prospect of winning or losing an election. So they always go where the voters are. They have to in order to win. And so if we can dramatically increase the number of voters who care deeply about climate change, well, politicians will follow with climate leadership, not out of the goodness of their hearts, but because their political future will depend on it. And that's, I think, the approach we need to take more of in the climate movement.
All right, Nathaniel Stinnett, thank you.
Thank you.